tell, then you see the road. I'm to my soul into the sides whenever the smoke clear out of my face and my picture perfect.
Hello and welcome back, fellow anime lovers, to Cypherfics. I am delighted to have you join us once again in the world of fanfiction and fantasy. This is the second part of, What If Harry Potter Enters Dragon Ball Super? Special note, this fanfic is written and a masterpiece of Gamer95 on FANFICTIONnet. Do check and support the author too. Now smash the like, share and subscribe button for more. Also press the bell icon so that you never miss such great parts. Thanks for the introduction. Now let's dive into the world. She knew that it was to protect the boy from evil wizards or whatever, but there was no way those people were the only family he had left. Surely there was someone out there that could take him to a safer, more secluded place. Wait, she sensed something. It was some sort of magical energy, similar to that of the old man's, surrounding the house. Could that be the reason for the boy's placement here? Some sort of spell. 22 seemed to notice it as well, and looked to her good counterpart. The energy felt wrong, as if it had been corrupted, driven insane, but neither of them knew what it was. That can't be right. 22 blinked, not really caring what had happened, but making a fair point nonetheless. The old man blinked in confused curiosity and looked over at the red-eyed android. Whatever do you mean? This weird energy is wrong. It's twisted and corrupted and evil. Android 21 explained. What is it? We should find a way to get rid of it. 22 shrugged indifferently. Actually, I kind of felt stronger, when I was beating those freaks half to death. She remarked aloud with a smirk. As if something was boosting my strength and speed. It felt good. The wizards blinked. You assaulted the Dursleys. Are they still alive? Minerva asked. 22 merely shrugged in response, and all of them made a mental note to avoid her at any and all costs. Minerva turned to Dumbledore. Albus, could it be the BLD wards? I don't know what that is, but there's definitely something wrong. 21 frowned deeply, holding Harry closer for safety. She didn't like the idea of Harry being here. She wanted to get him out of here and somewhere safe, wherever that may be. She narrowed her eyes at the three wizards. I don't want to be around these awful BLD ward things a moment longer. Is there a safer place we can have this conversation? She asked sternly, eyebrow raised. Albus seemed to be looking at the house, and his eyes were widening with realization at what was happening, and what he had done. None of this was supposed to happen. He was trying to help Harry, and yet he had subjected him to a living hell for years. How would James and Lily react if they knew this had happened? He hung his head in absolute shame and disbelief. The BLD wards had worked off of the familial bonds between those who lived inside the confines of the house. But he had never imagined what would have happened if someone within the home was hated and despised. These feelings of hate were amplified by the BLD wards. 21 looked down at Harry, who was holding onto her arm for protection. She smiled sadly at him, adjusting him again and keeping him close. Abuse aside, 21 had to admit Harry was adorable. He had such a shy little personality, and he was such a gentle little thing to hold. She just adored him. It was like holding a teddy bear that was alive and conscious. He was practically made to be held close and coddled, especially with the traumatic past he had suffered. Disturbing as it was, it made him more eager to receive this sort of affection from anyone he could. She gave him a soft, reassuring squeeze. Harry let out a small sigh and tried to remain as close as he could to 21. He didn't know what would happen to him when they were done here, and he was afraid she'd get rid of him or leave him behind, because why would she want to take him with her? She would leave him and he would be taken away by these people, and they would put him somewhere else with more bad people that wanted to hurt and abuse him, and then he would be right back where he started, and he didn't want that at all. He didn't know that 21 planned on keeping him, regardless of what anyone said. Heck, while it wasn't possible in the slightest, part of 21 wanted to hold on to Harry and never let him go. She wanted to keep him safe and snug in her arms, wrapped up and kept away from anything that could even slightly inconvenience him. Yes, she knew this wasn't possible, but it was a nice thought. The boy had been through more than enough to warrant this protective behavior as far as she was concerned. She tilted his head up gently to look at her and gave him her best smile, which he returned shyly. Android 22 rolled her eyes in exasperation. To think this was a version of herself she was too damned soft. It was downright nauseating to watch her diabetes-inducing interactions with this random boy. He was just a kid. There were millions of them out there. Why was this one so different? Ugh. There wasn't a lot 22 could do at the moment, and anything she tried especially towards Harry would probably end up with something worse than being stuck in a wall for a few hours. Whatever. If the BRT distracted her good side so she could do what she enjoyed, maybe he wouldn't be the worst thing to have around. Granted, she now lacked the power to do what she enjoyed most, so that was still a huge nuisance, but she would find something else to enjoy. She was sure of it. She found herself studying Harry close, trying to see just what was so special about him. He was certainly small. Most females seem to find small things inherently cute, and he did seem rather cuddly now that she looked at him. But still, he had been abused, so he was probably acting more like a wild animal who was being shown comfort rather than a human. What made him so special? Sure, he was tiny, and had large eyes, and seemed terrified of everything but oddly unafraid of herself, and he seemed to be trying to hug her good side as much as possible, but was unable due to being so small. She exhaled through her nostrils as she realized that, objectively speaking, this BRT was cute in the traditional sense that got all the lesser women cooing and gushing like a gaggle of Bursin-damaged idiots. Not her though. As far as she was concerned, cuteness was an utterly meaningless concept that, if anything, was insulting. After all, to be considered cute was to not be taken seriously. If he was as powerful or important as these old freaks seemed to be saying he was, why the hell didn't he do anything? If he was so powerful, why couldn't he fight back? Seriously, she was technically younger than he was, and yet she had nearly conquered the world. What was his excuse? It had to have been that tiny, scrawny body of his. His power was stunted because he was too much of a runt to be able to properly use it. How pitiful. This kid was a waste of time. Why bother with him? All he'd contribute was being the equivalent of a stuffed animal for her other half. He wouldn't bring anything meaningful to the table. But, much to her absolute frustration and anger, there wasn't anything she could do. 21 would probably bring the BRT with her, and if she tried anything, she'd be stuck in a wall again. Why did SHE have to be the one who got to keep her powers? 22 tried to find an answer where one did not exist. It was like some divine force was punishing her, and for what? Trying to take what was rightfully hers. Ridiculous. Why was life so unfair to her? She was perfect. Even more so than Cell. SHE deserved to be the one with all the power. She punched a nearby tree in frustration. This caused a beehive to fall off, land on top of her head and get stuck on it. 21 ignored her, while Harry seemed concerned for her well-being. Ignore her. 21 said flatly. She tried to kill everyone on Earth more than once. The fact that she's alive is probably more than she deserves if I'm being honest. Again, her statement and implications sent waves of tension through the magic users nearby, but the good android didn't much care. Let them be afraid of her power. The depowered android was running around SND screaming as the bees stung her. The android that still maintained her power sighed and turned to glare at the four before her. Tell me where I can find any and all of these monsters that sided with this Dark Lord, and I'll destroy them once and for all. She said this not as a request, nor as a friendly offer, but rather as a stern, angry demand. As I said earlier, we are uncertain where all of them are. Albus said, and 21 groaned in annoyance, but understood there were limits to this. She didn't know what their power felt like, so she couldn't track them down that way, so as of right now, she just had to deal with what was in front of her. She let out a sigh, then gave the wizards a stern glare. Harry is staying with me. There is no way around that. I am going to take care of him. If you have any issues with that, I'm afraid that's just too bad. He's under my care. I'll be the one to look after him, and I don't care who's okay with it or not," she said firmly. It was clear all of them had severe issues with that, but the other issue was none of them knew if they could beat her in a fight. Certainly not physically, but her power, or what to them they assumed to be magic, felt so different, and much more powerful than theirs. She narrowed her eyes. "What's your problem with me taking him?" she demanded. Dumbledore sighed tiredly. How best to express his concern for the boy's safety around such raw power, as well as a twin sister that clearly had a low opinion of him. Then again, they hadn't exactly made the greatest argument for why they should take care of Harry with how they had treated him thus far, so it was hard to say they were better. 21 clearly cared for Harry, while 22 clearly didn't. But it was clear that 21 was stronger, and there wasn't much they could do here. Dumbledore sighed and shook his head. "It is not important. We will not prevent you from caring for young Harry. Just do make sure that your far harsher sister doesn't do anything to harm him." 21 turned to scowl at her evil clone, who was struggling to pry the beehive off her head as the insects attacked her. "Even if she wanted to, she can't," 2Q said flatly. "She knows what'll happen to her if she tries anything. Right?" A long string of muffled curses was her evil half's response. "Yeah, she gets it." 21 nodded. "But I need to ask. Why now? Why'd you suddenly decide now was a good time to check on Harry, rather than any time before this?" "As I said, I am a very busy man who has a lot of jobs to work." 21 frowned at him and raised her brow, not amused. "Then you should have sent someone in your place." That gave the old man pause. I did have someone on lookout. She lives next door. Arabella Fig," he offered meekly. "She's nice," Harry said timidly. "I stayed with her when my family would leave and don't want a freak coming with them." "And she didn't notice anything wrong with that?" 21 spoke harsher than she intended, and she kicked herself for it when she felt Harry tense up. No, I never told her anything was wrong," Harry mumbled. Android 21 gave him a sympathetic look. She wasn't surprised that the little boy in her arms had opted to suffer in silence. He seemed the type to blame himself for every single thing that went wrong just to spare others the guilt or consequences. Even if those same people hurt him first. He was such a sweet innocent little boy, and it was so unfair how he had been treated. Yet through it all he'd still try to keep himself because of the fear he had drilled into him. If he spoke to anyone about his family's abuse, he'd be hurt more, so ergo, he should remain quiet. She closed her eyes and fought the urge to blast her way through the wall of that damned house and beat those monsters senseless herself. But she wouldn't. She was not her sister. She would never be her sister. But at times like this, she wasn't sure if she envied her sister's wicked ways, but she envied her ability to act so carelessly. That sense of freedom, of unleashing some sort of beast, was tempting, but 21 knew she couldn't. Not if she was going to care for Harry. And she was going to care for him, and no one could tell her otherwise. She looked down at the boy in question and smiled. He still looked like he was in disbelief that she was actually willingly taking him into her care, and she gave him a gentle kiss on the forehead. "There's no reason to be so shocked, sweetheart. You know I care about you very much," she said softly. The look of genuine astonishment and confusion hurt to see. It was just painting things in a much clearer light how horrifically he had been treated. Pushed to a point when he believed even love was something he didn't deserve. Why would you care about a freak?" Harry asked timidly, and Minerva shot Albus a look that promised nothing but a violent, painful end. She didn't intend to physically harm him, but she would see to it that he understood how gravely he had been in error. It was bad enough they were seeing this. If the wizarding world heard about this, the scandal that would erupt, the calls for action, justice, possibly even war against the Muggles, it would be catastrophic on a level not seen since Grindelwald's days. Dumbledore made a horrible mistake, more so than he had initially realized. This had the potential to seriously hurt more people than just Harry. The wizarding world could never find out about this. He watched this strange girl holding the young Harry close and let out a sigh. He couldn't take him away from this, not when he finally found someone that would love him like he had wanted all his life. He was far from heartless and delusional, contrary to what some people would adamantly insist he was. He knew that keeping him with people who hated and abused him was an absolutely horrible idea. But Petunia hadn't rejected her nephew that night, so he had the faintest spark of hope that perhaps in time they could grow, bond, come to care for him. Yet that was clearly now a fool's dream. He knew now there was nothing he could do to change this, and he knew there was nothing he could or should do to stop this new woman from caring for Harry. He let out a sigh and massaged his temples, trying to stave off his forming headache, albeit half-heartedly, as a part of him felt he deserved it. "But young lady, please tell me, where exactly do you and your sister live?" he asked. The way the pink-skinned woman tensed up at the question certainly didn't boost his confidence in the situation. 21 coughed, and her sister finally got the beehive off her head. "We're homeless," she said flatly, his face swollen horrifically. "Also. Ow. Looks good." 21 smirked, but recoiled by the feint her sister threw at her. She didn't know why, when she was much stronger. Must be reflexes from when she was still her equal. And now she had 4 people staring at her like she was insane. Great. Thankfully, Harry didn't seem that judgmental, probably because he had no idea what the heck was going on, but still. I mean, she tried to form words, or a thought, but nothing came to be. She gave Harry a gentle squeeze and closed her eyes, trying to find the right words to say to the concerned old man. "Well, it seems I'll have to provide you with accommodations for the time being then." Dumbledore sighed. Across worlds, perhaps even outside of the world which those who practiced magic knew about. I don't know how many people were killed. I dunno, actually. But we did a lot of damage. We always do a lot of property damage. Are you sure it's a good idea to use him for this? If no one died, then we're wasting his power and'll have to wait a year. Back with androids 21 and 22. Harry still wasn't sure what was going on, but Miss 21's words were so nice. She seemed to actually like him, to actually care for him. Maybe she was evil. Maybe she was only being nice, but she was gonna make him a SLV again. Maybe she'd hurt him for fun, maybe she'd eat him, or something. Harry didn't like those thoughts, and genuinely thought 21 wouldn't, but after all he had been through, sometimes the truth and one's fears were hard to discern. Her smile seemed so sincere though, as did her concern for him. Never at any point did she regard him with any sort of disdain or disgust. She never yelled at him. She helped him feel better. She had done everything she could to make sure he knew he was safe, that he was okay, that he would no longer be harmed. So why couldn't he just feel happy? Why did he have to have this overwhelming sense of fear bubbling and stewing inside of him? Why did he have to be born with the freaky stuff that forced his family to hate him and want to hurt him? Why did his mommy and daddy have to die and leave him alone in the world? Why couldn't his life just be normal? Why couldn't he be happy? Why? 21 noticed Harry seemed close to crying inside, pulling him closer, resting his head against her chest and kissing the top of his cute little head. It's okay, sweetie. She cooed softly. You're sage now, I'm gonna take good care of you. You're never gonna be hurt again, you're never gonna be mistreated again. I promise. WHY. Harry managed to get out, and 21 sighed softly. Because you're too cute for that to happen to you. She smiled. You're such a sweet little thing, and I just want to keep you safe. She felt like a broken record, always repeating the same words of reassurance to try and improve this boy's self-esteem. But she just didn't know what else to do. Despite how much she already loved him, she really didn't know too much about him as a person, so all she could do was point out what should have been painfully obvious. What should have been? What his entire life should have been was the exact opposite of what it was. That was what she firmly believed. She frowned but didn't sense the power of the Dragon Ball, so most likely she couldn't use them to make Harry's life better, so she'd just have to take care of him herself. Well, him, and her bloodthirsty sister. 22 was probably going to be a real issue, the more she thought about it. She wasn't remorseful, but she also wasn't willing to change. It wasn't a good situation, however she looked at it. However, she had very little power left, to the point where she probably couldn't even beat Yamcha in a head-to-head fight. That gave her a huge advantage. She could easily physically overwhelm her if she got to be too much. She just didn't want it to come to that too often. It might give her child the impression that she was violent. Still, if her other side had to learn that, then she had to learn it. Harry wouldn't have to learn that, though. He was a sweet, adorable little baby cinnamon bun. He was clearly just trying his best to make others happy, even to his own detriment, and 21 sighed softly, patting his head again. She would do everything she can to keep him happy. He needed someone else to play that role for him, someone that would do everything in their power to keep him feeling safe and at ease. For a change, he had spent his entire life catering to ungrateful monsters, and for absolutely no gain for himself. That needed to change. But how? What could she do to help him? Aside from wrapping him up in a blanket, hugging him tightly and never letting him go, she wasn't sure what to do beyond that. Which in turn, was an issue, as if she was going to be his mom, she couldn't just hug him and call it a job well done. She needed to do more, she needed to be better. But how? Somewhere else. Look, I get your point, and I won't try and talk you out of it. But it seems like it could be a bad idea. And what if there were innocents who died? Isn't dealing with a few clones worth the trade-off if we bring those who lost so much back? Hey, I never said don't do it. I was saying be careful, you know. Back on Earth. Hey, Harry. I want you to know something. 21 remarked, smiling down at him. She kissed his forehead and closed her eyes with a smile. I love you. That caused the dam to burst. Those 3 simple words was all it took for little Harry Potter to break down, bawling his eyes out right then and there, as all his pain and suffering fully caught up to him. 21 frowned and just held Harry close, letting him cry into her chest. She could tell this had been a long time coming, and she felt the pain he felt. She didn't understand the pain he had experienced, and doubted she ever would, but man, did she ever feel the pain nonetheless. She had known what pain had felt like, most certainly, her evil half had made absolutely sure of that, but that pain came from a hard-fought battle where both sides stood a chance of winning. In Harry's case, it was an utterly one-sided, no-holds-barred beatdown with absolutely no mercy shown whatsoever, directed at a helpless little boy that couldn't defend himself. She didn't feel like she needed to train him to defend himself, he had been through enough as it was. So, she simply resolved she'd keep him safe. As he got older, he may learn a thing or two, but right now, he was far too broken for that. Speaking of horrifically broken and somewhat mutilated, she looked to her sister, who still seemed pretty pissed off about everything, really. That was something else she'd have to deal with. After she had abused her power and used it to hurt so many innocent lives, she couldn't imagine a more fitting punishment than having all of that power she abused ripped away from her and given to a more benevolent version. She wanted to believe her other side could be better, but well, she never tried to be. She always wanted to be twisted and sadistic, yet she could be so much more. Maybe one day she'd learn. Currently, she was clutching onto one of the bees that had been attacking her with her index finger and thumb, and she was taking great, sadistic pleasure in increasing pressure and squeezing it to death. She swatted the other android's hand to free the poor thing from her clutches. She glared at her, but 21's face said, "Behave, or you're going into a wall." Annoyingly 22 seemed to reply with, "Don't you mean beah dash," then 21 hit her again. Lighter this time, but it got the message across. The evil android scowled dangerously and punched her in the face, then promptly pulled her fist back with a hiss as the intense pain of a nearly sprained arm shot through her body. 21 smirked smugly before returning attention to her crying son. "Aw, you don't have to be sad anymore." 21 spoke softly, hugging the still crying Harry. "It's gonna be better now, you'll see." "Really?" Harry stammered afraid to let his hopes be raised even slightly. 21 smiled. You're gonna be taken well care of. Harry responded by whimpering and burying his face into her chest, causing her to groan sadly and give him a squeeze. 22 scoffed and rolled her eyes. This whole thing was too damned mushy for her. 21 couldn't care less. Somewhere else. Eternal Dragon, by your name, I summon you forth, Shinran. Braz-a-t-t-t. Shwaya. I am the Eternal Dragon. Speak your wish and it shall be so. I wish for all those killed in the recent attacks to be brought back. Suddenly, 21 felt a forceful pull of gravity and grunted. 22 felt it as well. And because 21 was holding Harry, he too felt the sudden pressure. And then, in a flash, they were all gone. Those who remained blinked in confusion, but that confusion turned to shock and then horror when they realized the three they had been trying to help were gone, and none of them could sense the magic the two who had it carried. Meaning they were gone, and they had no way of finding them. The transportation was far from a smooth one for any of the ones taken from the world of the wizards and muggles. It was like being transported through the stratosphere at the speed of sound. And what was worse, 21 had lost her grip on Harry without realizing it, sending him crashing into 22 just as the transportation phase ended. Soon enough, 22, who had instinctively caught Harry and had been holding him, screamed as she fell down from several feet in the air and smashed into the sand on a beach, burying the both of them in the sand. She groaned, pulling herself up and shaking her head, getting the sand out of it. She wasn't the biggest fan of it, as it was coarse, rough and got everywhere she blinked, her vision coming back to normal. Where was she? This place felt familiar, but it also didn't. Ugh. Great. The heck was that about? She grumbled, looking around. Hey, stupider and weaker me, you know what happened. She received no response, which oddly made her a little nervous. Not because she didn't like being alone, heck, she wanted to be so she could be evil and have fun again, but because they could be on a different planet for all she knew. She narrowed her eyes and slowly rose to her feet, crossing her arms over her breast and looking around. This beach looked similar enough to the world she was familiar with. The sun was setting, it wasn't a bad view actually. She let out a sigh and decided to take a seat on the sand for a while and wait to see what happened next. Just then, she noticed the sand next to her shift slightly. Blinking, she looked over to see what was going on. The sand seemed to be rising, a small pile forming and slowly getting bigger and bigger, and then the kid's head popped out of the sand with a gasp. Great, just what I need, she mentally muttered, looking down at the kid then looking back to the sunset. Ugh. The BRT's gonna be looking for the other me. She also knew she couldn't just leave him buried in the sand, so after a moment, she grabbed him and roughly pulled him out. The boy squeaked and winced at how harshly she plucked him free from his sandy prison, feeling a small amount of pain shoot through his body. 22 set him down and turned away, crossing her arms. There, you're out. Now don't bug me. Leave me alone or I'll put you back in, and this time it'll be head first. Harry whimpered and shrunk back. What had happened to Miss 21? She was so nice to him, for the first time in his entire life, someone was kind to him. But now, he was Miss 22, who seemed to have the same disdain for him that everyone else did. He pulled his legs close and sniffled slightly, trying to hold back tears. He was so tired, and still so broken. Ugh, don't start crying on me, I don't want to listen to that. 22 groaned as she rolled her eyes. That just made it even harder for Harry to fight back the tears, but against all odds, he had managed. He wiped his face with his forearm and let out a sniffle before he opted to just sit somewhere as far away from 22 as possible while also not losing sight of her so he didn't have to be all alone. He looked around, and everything felt different. This wasn't his neighborhood, this wasn't his home, so where was he? He settled down, once again alone and feeling worthless and unloved. What was he doing wrong? Why had he been so cursed to be so worthless? Ha! The BRT actually listened. Good. 22 blinked, casting a brief glance over to Harry. He wasn't crying, and he wasn't near her. Great. Sighing, she rested her chin on her fist and looked back over at the boy. Hey. She'll come looking for you. She can sense our energy. We're just gonna wait here until she finds us. So quit sulking and just be patient. She said curtly. She wasn't quite pleased with the general mood he was giving off. For some reason seeing the kid upset annoyed the hell out of her. It was like those feelings were wafting over her way. She had enough to deal with. The last thing she wanted and or needed were some little kid's upset feelings dragging her down as well. Yet despite her best efforts, she couldn't just ignore him. If anything, this just made her more frustrated with him, as she couldn't just throw him away, both not being strong enough, and knowing her good side would kill her if she did, but also didn't care enough to try and comfort him. She huffed and kicked at the ground with her foot to express her frustration with the situation. This caused the boy to flinch, which in turn further annoyed her. She snorted and turned to look away, crossing her arms and slouching forward, sulking bitterly at the annoying situation. What sick twisted force above had decided it would be a good idea to leave this little BRT alone with her and not Miss Perfect Goody Two Shoes? Where even was she? 21 wasn't in a great place. For one thing, she was currently stuck in the ground. For another, far more important thing, she didn't hear Harry nearby, and didn't have him in her arms when she crash-landed. So now she wasn't sure where he was, and she couldn't sense his energy at the moment. Her legs twitched for several seconds. They then started to flail wildly. After several minutes of frantically kicking around, she pressed her feet against the ground, her tail swishing about in the air violently as she pushed upward, struggling to yank herself free from her situation. This was bad. Really, really bad. She didn't know where she was, she didn't know where her evil half was, and most importantly, she didn't know where Harry was. She couldn't just sit back and do nothing, she had to get out of here. She had to find them. Her rear end started to move about violently as she struggled to pry herself free, getting increasingly more desperate at the thought of poor little Harry, lost and alone, thinking she had chosen to leave him. Or, even worse, he was stuck with her evil side. She didn't trust herself not to hurt him, not her evil side or herself. 22. She meant 22. And the last thing she wanted was for her evil sister to take her frustration out on poor little Harry. The boy was too sensitive, too damaged to be left alone with someone so cruel and thoughtless. Someone that had endless BLD on her hands. Someone that cared only for satisfying her selfish sense of self-gratification. She sighed deeply and flew off. She had a million questions, but right now, Harry was more important. As she flew, things seemed eerily familiar to her. But to the android's annoyance, she couldn't remember where she was. But this world's energy, there was no doubt about it. She was back in her original world, no doubt the work of the Dragon Ball. There were familiar key signatures somewhere nearby. Was that Goku and Krillin? Well, now she had another dilemma. Did she go and see if she was right, or go find Harry? On the one hand, if it was them, they might be able to help find Harry and 22. But at the same time, if it was them, she didn't know how they'd react to her being alive. Let alone her evil side being alive. But then, it was probably for the best that she did find them quickly so she could explain the situation and make sure that they didn't attack her evil half with intent to kill. She may be a nuisance, but the way she was now, she really wasn't much of a threat, and she felt redemption was a possibility for her. 21 knew that 22 didn't think that. Or really even care. Ugh, why did she have to be like that? Why couldn't she just calm down for once? She wasn't even asking her to be good, but rather just asking her to not try and kill everyone. All she could do now was hope Harry was okay. Harry hadn't moved from his spot on the beach for nearly an hour, fidgeting uncomfortably every now and then as he looked at his companion, who was scowling bitterly at the ocean before them, staring off into the distance, lost in her own anger and disdain. He looked away nervously and stared at the sand. The BRT was quiet and staying away from her, so that was good. The last thing she wanted or needed was to have him start crying and try and come near her. If anything, it just annoyed her more. Where was her good side? Why couldn't she come get this kid and deal with him? Just seeing him sitting there was bugging her because it made her feel like she was supposed to be doing something about it, even though she really didn't want to do anything about it. He was the other android's BRT, she didn't want anything to do with him, he wasn't her responsibility, so why did she have to get stuck with him? Was this just another cruel joke the universe decided to play on her? Like taking away her powers, or making her stuck with a good self who wanted to help people? Or having her stuck in walls all the time? Or how now she couldn't even fly or fight? Okay, technically she could still fight, but only against normal humans that couldn't fight back. The way she was now, she would probably lose to that loudmouthed blowhard Mr. Satan, and it wouldn't even be close. She seethed and pulled her legs closer, stewing in her bitter resentment. Casting a glance over to Harry and noticing him looking at her, as if he was concerned for her. What? She snapped, and the boy winced, looking away quickly. Yeah, that's right. Don't bother me. He looked back out over the water and exhaled in annoyance. What was she supposed to do? Growling, she rose to her feet and grabbed a nearby stone. She hurled it at the water as hard as Ahe could and it skipped across the surface. It skipped forward multiple times. In fact, it never actually stopped. It just kept going until it finally disappeared over the horizon, where she assumed it was still moving. She huffed and crossed her arms. Cool, the boy spoke up. She snorted. You think that's cool? That's nothing. She said curtly. Watch this. She grabbed a handful of rocks and repeated the motion, sending them all skipping at once, just as the first one had. There was something about the amazement on the boy's face that was almost amusing. She couldn't say why, it was such a simple thing she was doing, and it seemed like the coolest thing to him. Then again, she found him bleeding and living under stairs, so it was fair to assume he may not have a whole lot to consider cool. Still, it felt nice to have something she did appreciate it for once. That expression had never been directed her way before. She was used to people looking at her with fear, hatred, and disgust. To see a sincere smile directed her way was it was nice. Then she got to thinking might as well talk to the BRT just a bit better than doing literally nothing. So what were you doing under the stairs like that? She asked, offhandedly. She frowned when he saw Harry flinch, as if he was afraid to answer a simple question. Come on kid, work with me. I'm trying to talk to you, and dash. I live there. Harry said in barely a whisper. She blinked and raised a brow. You live there? Well, that seems pretty dumb. That place is way too small, even you can barely fit in there. Why would you want to be in there at all? She asked in a confused manner. Didn't want to had to. Uh-huh. 22 blinked, raising a brow. She didn't think they were a poor family, honestly she assumed it was because they just didn't like him and were monsters. But she didn't want to bring that up just yet, so, why? It was I deserved. Harry mumbled. 22 wanted to tell him to speak up, but he still seemed so terrified of speaking about this at all. She wasn't an idiot, she had a pretty good feeling that essentially he had been told he'd be hurt if he ever told anyone about his abuse. That was just wrong, even to 22. Sure, she wanted to commit literal genocide and eat people, but she was at least upfront and honest about it. These people were honestly so pathetic. They weren't just evil, they were sniveling cowards that wanted to hide that they were evil so that they could evade any sort of consequences for it. How very pitiful. She also really didn't believe in torture like they had done to this boy. If you were going to kill somebody, at least do it quickly, efficiently, and painlessly, don't pointlessly drag it out for as long as possible by physically damaging them over the span of several years. It was inefficient, and okay, she would admit it, it was just too cruel even by her standards. She looked at the boy again. No wonder he was like this. He wasn't broken, he was shattered. He didn't know what to do with his life, he didn't know what to do around people, he just existed. It was as if he literally had no idea what was expected of him, and all he could do was try and make those who found him happy so they wouldn't hurt him. What kind of life was that? A sad one, that's what. She let out a sigh and looked over at the boy with a half-hearted scowl. DMN little BRT, he's making me feel things I never knew I could feel, she thought bitterly. She didn't even know how to describe this unpleasant feeling welling up inside her. Was she feeling bad for him? Dang it. She didn't feel bad for people. She didn't even care about people. She was like Frisia in that regard, cold and uncaring, and that was the end of this conversation. But dash. End. Of. Conversation. She mentally screamed at herself. But to her annoyance, the conversation continued. How is one tiny BRT doing this to me? It's not like he's trying to manipulate me, and what's the point of feeling bad for him? He's small, barely even worth taking note of. If I had my powers, I doubt I'd even bother transforming him. So why do I feel like this? She gritted her teeth in frustration and turned away from him to try and collect her thoughts. To get them out of her head. They wouldn't go away. DMN it to hell, I am not going to go through some lame redemption arc or whatever the hell they call it. She was not some soft goody-goody that went around sniffing flowers, playing with kittens and chasing butterflies like her other half was. She was a powerful goddess that was going to make the world her personal playground. She glared down at Harry, blaming him for this, and smirked slightly when he recoiled in fear. She left him alone again, deciding talking to him wasn't a good option, but there wasn't much else to do. She considered throwing rocks at him to kill time, but if 21 found out about that, she could forget being stuck in a wall, she'd be stuck in hell, forever. Well, that's out of the question. She muttered, looking around the island. She half expected to see a lone house or something, but nothing. She swore she could see a building way off in the distance, but she couldn't fly to it, and she doubted the BRT could swim. Then she squinted and looked closer before coming to the realization that the house off in the distance belonged to that perv old man. Great, now she really didn't want to go over there. The last thing she needed was to have to deal with some nasty old geezer trying to grab a handful of her. Well now, would you look at that? Go out for a little walk on the beach and find a real lovely treasure. Her eye twitched as she realized that Mstr Rashi had come across the two of them. And she was weaker than him. Oh, if he touched her, she was going to blow her lid. Ahihi wait oh. The heck? The perv old man blinked, confused. Aren't you the crazy one who just tried to murder everyone? Yes. Your point. 22 snarled. I can work with crazy. Rashi shrugged, his response not being what 22 had wanted to hear. She rose her feet and slammed a fist down on his head, sending him sprawling out face first on the sand. The man picked himself up and nursed his goose egg. Ha! Figured you'd pack more of a wallop, missy. Shut up you old perv. 22 snarled. Miss 22. Why did you hit that man? Rashi and 22 turned and now saw Harry looking up with a confused but also frightened expression. The small boy wasn't sure why 22 had attacked this old man or even who he was, but her violence reminded him of what he had been through. 'Cause he's a filthy good-for-nothing perv. 22 spat. He. What she said? Rashi said shamelessly. Harry blinked in confusion. Why was the old man so okay with being hit like that? Was he just used to it? Maybe he could teach him how to get so used to getting hit that he could just laugh off the pain too. So, the heck are you doing here? Last I heard, you were dead. Rashi remarked, sensing an insane amount of power, but it wasn't coming from the pink android, so he didn't feel a need to worry too much about her. He also wanted to know what a random kid was doing here, but figured it'd be better to figure out who this hot chick was, and what she was doing Friday night. Android 22 feigned a pleasant smile and looked as though she was considering how to answer his question. Oh, well, her pleasant demeanor faded almost immediately. That's none of your goddamn business, now, is it? Rashi grinned widely as his nose started to bleed. Not only was this girl a real looker, but she was quite the feisty one as well. He felt as though he was in love. She simply scowled at him. Harry kept watching, confused. He felt like he should say something, but at the same time, he didn't know what exactly was happening, where he was, or who these people were aside from 22, and he only really knew her name, and that she was kinda mean, so he didn't want to interrupt. Really, all he wanted at this point was Miss 21. Where was she? Was she looking for him, or had she already forgotten about him? Or did she decide she didn't want him after all and seize the opportunity to abandon him while she had the chance? He really didn't want to think the worst of her like that, but after all he had been through, the worst was often all he could think about. He couldn't really blame her if she didn't want him, he knew he was worthless, so why did he keep thinking someone would be nice to him? He wasn't even human, just a freak. Miss 21 must have realized that and left while she still could. So now, here was, alone again. He looked down at the sand, his green eyes dulling from the emotional anguish that shot through him at the awful realization. 22 didn't care enough to notice, but Rashi was ever the observant one. Hey now, Sonny, what's eatin' ya there? Not seein' much of that young energy in those eyes of yours. Harry looked up, but didn't say anything. He wasn't sure what to say in this situation. Ugh, I don't know what his problem is. 22 muttered, annoyed. My sister found him in some bad place, and he's been depressed ever since we got here. She didn't feel like mentioning the clear abuse she had seen him in. You have a sister? Rashi asked, his focus doing a 180. Kinda. I dunno, it's weird. 22 muttered. Must be the other one then. He had two appealing ladies, one as sweet as a cherry pie, the other one as cold as ice. Oh, what I wouldn't give to get in the middle of that. Rashi chuckled as his nose bled. 22 punched him right in the face. Harry winced and recoiled slightly, believing he was going to be punched next, which just annoyed 22 more than anything. Ugh, relax, BRT. She muttered. I'm not gonna hit you. He was just being a creepy old perv and had it coming. That's not all that's dash, Rashi began, but was hit again by 22. There's a kid here, what the hell? She snapped. Rashi laughed again and 22 seriously began to question whether that nosebleed was from the punch or the disgusting alternative. You go on ahead and punish me all you want, missy. You won't hear a word of complaint out of this old man. Wham! Stop enjoying this. Can't, Rashi coughed, still laughing. Harry, meanwhile, was more confused than ever by what was happening before him. He really and truly didn't know how to feel by what he was seeing, so he simply shrank back even more. He really just wanted. Harry! A familiar voice exclaimed as Harry suddenly felt himself being picked up by a pair of pink arms. He squeaked in surprise and turned to see Android 21 was holding him. His eyes widened, and then the feeling of pure relief flowed through him. You're back, you really came back. I thought you forgot. No. I would never forget, the pink android said softly. At that moment, two other people arrived. A bulky man with spiky black hair and a short bald man. I knew there was something off about that power, sir. Wait, 21. Goku? 21 blinked, confused. Hi. Hey. There was an awkward silence. So what are you doing? Alive? 21 asked. Pretty much. I dunno. The android shrugged. I just woke up, and then all of a sudden, something pulled me back here. Oh. Great. 22 snarled, seeing who had arrived. You two idiots, this is exactly what I needed. Ah, come on boys. Don't ruin a good thing. Rashi protested. The two who arrived with 21 deciding to ignore their MSTR's perv for the time being. Geez, they're really both back, Krillin muttered. Yes, but like I said, she's lost her powers. 21 nodded, now turning her attention to Harry. Goku's eyes widened. What? Aw man, that's a bummer. She was a really great fight. 22 scoffed and rolled her eyes. Fighting, fighting, fighting. Do you ever think about anything else, you stupid monkey? She huffed before sticking her nose up. Ha! Now you sound like Frisia. Goku chuckled. Ugh, shut up, you're giving me a headache, 22 grunted. I'll be honest, I didn't really think you'd be brought back by the dragon. Ball. Goku admitted, realizing something. Let alone both of you. Indeed. 21 sighed. I don't know how I survived in the first place, but we were on an Earth, a different Earth. Yeah, I still can't imagine what that was like. It was obnoxious. And boring. There was this obnoxious family, and this obnoxious kid. And we picked up that BRT. Krillin looked over and his eyes widened when he saw Harry. Oh my god, what happened to him? He exclaimed. The aforementioned obnoxious family. They're the ones responsible for how he turned out, 21 sighed sadly. Krillin gritted his teeth and turned away to seethe. As a parent himself, any adult harming a child was a serious trigger for both him and his wife. The rage he currently felt. Ugh, why'd you two have to ruin a good thing? Rashi groaned. MSTR Rashi, she was hitting you. Yeah. She couldn't hit me like it hurt, if anything it felt good. The old man shrugged, and 21 mentally sighed, having only heard of the perv old turtle MSTR, and now seeing those stories sadly weren't exaggerated. He turned to her with a grin. Please don't. She said flatly. Rashi simply snickered in response. 21 sighed and turned her back on him. Ah, lighten up, missy, I'm just a sweet old man with a heart of gold. 21 stiffened as she felt the old man patting her rear end. She swatted him as hard as she could with her tail. Yow. Ha, not bad. Rashi yelled, pulling his hand back. Harry watching in absolute confusion. So, how long have you two been alive? I have no idea. 21 shrugged. It felt like mere moments after the explosion that I woke up in his word. She remarked, nodding down to Harry. Then, a few hours later, I was pulled back here. How long have I been gone? About 3 months. Krillin shrugged. 21 blinked and nodded her head. So we've been unconscious then, but where were we all that time? The other world, duh. 22 replied, rolling her eyes. No, that wouldn't make sense, we appeared in a very public setting. There's no way we wouldn't have been removed from the park. Someone would have noticed me lying there knocked out and your legs sticking out of the dirt. Don't say it in front of the idiots. 22 barked angrily. Look, time travel's confusing. I should know. Goku remarked. And apparently sometimes time moves differently in another dimension compared to ours. Like in Universe 5 compared to us, apparently an hour is like 20 minutes there. I'm sorry. What are you going on about? It's a whole thing. A lot's happened in the 3 months you've been gone. Krillin answered. Still a bit uneasy about both androids being here. Regardless of how good May 21st have been, especially in her final moments, there was still a lot of damage done because of her. 21's eyes widened. Uh-oh, what happened? Is it still going on? I don't want to get Harry mixed up in anything bad, Goku chuckled and rubbed the back of his head. Android 21 took that as a good sign. No worries. I took care of it as always. Yeah, it seems there's always something going on in this world we live in. Big world-threatening fights are practically a monthly occurrence. Not to worry though, we're kind of on a stretch of peace and quiet. Krillin chuckled. Just so long as Goku doesn't try and start another tournament that nearly gets all of reality erased, he added under his breath. 21 overheard it, but didn't question it, having a feeling that was a long, long story. So we've been gone 3 months, but it only feels like it's been 5 hours. 21 muttered, trying to think things over. That could be it. Rashi shrugged. If you're saying, the kid here is from another Earth, chances are why somehow got sent there when you died. And 4 hours there was 3 months here. He raised a fair point, and 21 considered it. The old man cricked his shoulders and neck. Boy, I tell you what, all that pleasurin's got me worn out. How about we head back to Kame House and talk more about this over some drinks and some nice grub, huh? You better have hetap. 22 said with a death glare, crossing her arms over her bust as she leered at the old man. 22, no. You are not getting yourself drunk in the middle of the day. 21 chided. 22 growled and flipped her off. 21 responded by kicking a wave of sand at her, sending her skidding several feet away with her twitching legs sticking out of a pile of sand. Huh. Rashi blinked, feeling like trying to get down with this chick may end badly. And not in the good way. 21 looked to her evil half, then down at Harry. The tiny boy in her arms had been tragically characteristically quiet, just watching everything play out around him. But unlike others, 21 knew he wasn't planning some grand strategy, he was just too scared to speak. She gave him a gentle squeeze and lightly bounced him in her arms to offer him a sense of comfort and security. It's okay. These new people are all very nice, even if they are a little bit on the weird side for the most part. She noticed Goku seemed to be dying to speak to Harry about something and let out a sigh. I take it you want to know about this unusual energy he gives off, don't you, Goku? Yes. I have no idea what kind of power this kid has. I've never felt anything like it before. He exclaimed. Yeah, I know. 21 frowned. Look, you can ask him, but he's pretty shy about it. All I know is he has some sort of power, and it upsets him for some reason, so don't dash. Her words fell on deaf ears, as Goku was already asking questions to Harry, who was looking up with wide eyes. Both at being asked questions about his freakishness, and because someone was talking to him. He really didn't know how to answer any of them, but he really felt like he had to try. There was something reassuring about the man's enthusiasm. Goku was able to learn bits and pieces of what Harry's magic had to offer. He had yet to ever use it for combat purposes, but it had some unique traits, and Goku was currently pleading with the boy to change the color of his GI, much to Mr. Rashi's desperate protests, as he didn't want his precious uniforms tampered with. Ah, come on, Mr. Rashi. I always wondered what this outfit would look like in blue. Goku whined. Harry didn't feel as nervous around the man as he thought he would. He seemed friendly, almost childlike for reasons Harry didn't understand. But unfortunately, there wasn't much he could do to show his power, as he barely understood it. Goku, the kid probably doesn't know what it even is. Krillin remarked. It certainly ain't key, and if it is some sort of magic, he probably can't just command it without learning about it first. But then again, who do we know who could teach him about that? Whis? Maybe, but I don't know if Whis would know about this kind of power. It kind of feels like the kind of power Babidi had. Maybe he has some relatives that could teach him how to use it. Goku said as if he came to a brilliant conclusion. Everyone else looked at him like he was completely insane. Goku, there is no way I am letting you get this kid mixed up in anything to do with that little flea. Krillin said sternly. Goku frowned and looked thoughtful, trying to come to the right conclusion to help the boy. Fortune teller Baba. She might know where we can find someone to help, Krillin mused. Was there anyone in the kid's world who knew anything about this? Yes. The ones who left him where I found him. 21 scowled, still angry at those who had left her son to suffer. Sure, it wasn't totally intentional, but it was still close. Enough. And I take it they're not an option? Rashi asked. We can't back to his world, so no. 21 shrugged. Maybe we can bring them here. Goku exclaimed. Goku, we just used the Dragon Ball to revive everyone. I don't think they're good to help people transcend dimensions. Krillin said. I doubt they'd appreciate it either. Rashi nodded. Pfft. Who cares what those morons would appreciate? 22 huffed. Harry wanted to speak up, but if there was anyone who genuinely frightened him from the group, it was Android 22. He settled back into 21's arms and let out a tiny sigh. 21 smiled down at him and kissed the top of his head. It's okay, love. She said with a smile. He smiled back weakly, trying to squash down the feeling of fear and dread welling up inside him. Android 21 let out a soft sigh and turned him around so that his face was buried in her chest. She gently patted his back. It's okay, she whispered again. Harry believed her, or at least, he really wanted to. She was so nice and kind to him, even though she didn't need to be. Maybe she was right. Maybe she wasn't just being kind because she could, but because she wanted to. Maybe she wasn't going to abandon him, maybe. Harry fell deeper into his thoughts, trying to understand everything that had been happening as of late. Until very recently, his normal daily routine was being screamed at, doing copious amounts of chores, receiving very harsh and brutal physical punishments and crying himself to sleep as quietly as possible so that no one heard it. But now he was being held close, comforted, told he was loved. It was such a surreal scenario and he had no idea what to make of any of it. Was he to just leave his past behind? Just try and forget it ever happened? Honestly? He'd like that. He'd like to just move on, he'd like to be able to move on. He wanted to move on and have a normal life. Or at least, a happy one. He didn't really care what that meant, he just didn't want to be living in fear and pain all the time. But it was hard. He had lived through that nightmare for 5 years. It just didn't seem possible for it to all just go away like it or not, these memories, this trauma, was something he was just stuck with. He allowed himself to hope for the first time in a long time, though. He allowed himself to hope that Miss 21 would be there to help him in some regard. He just desperately wanted someone to care for him, he didn't even care who it was. He was just so broken and tired of everything he had been through, that he just wanted someone to be kind to him, for once. And he had that now. And he knew it was real, that it wasn't all an act, but then there was his new caregiver's mean twin. Miss 22 made him nervous and left him feeling like he was going to end up feeling that same pain again in one way or another. She clearly already wanted to verbally abuse him and tell him how much she didn't like him and was only holding back from doing so out of fear that Miss 21 would beat her up. At the very least he had a very nice safety jet. Miss 21 would protect him. He settled down and let himself relax ever so slightly. He was afraid to let his guard down completely, lest he find out this was a dream or a trap, but in this moment, he was having a hard time believing that. So back to question 1. 21 thought. Where are we gonna live? I need someplace safe for Harry, and someplace I can control 22. Rashi seemed to catch on to what she was thinking and spoke up. Got plenty of room over at Came House if you whippersnappers need a place to stay. She noticed the looks he was getting. Yeah, I said whippersnappers. I'm old, get over it. 21 considered his offer. While it was kind of him, and very convenient, she also didn't want to deal with his perv attitude. But where else could she go? She didn't expect Goku and Krillin's wives to give her a chance, both because of the whole nearly datering the world thing and because of 22, but where else was there? Capsule Corporation. From what she had read, it was certainly large, but how would Bulma and Veg? Oh. Vegeta. Right. Sooner or later, Harry would probably meet him and she was not looking forward to that. In both her good and bad self, she hadn't seen much of him, aside from the fact that he was a proud warrior and also kind of a huge JRK to pretty much everyone. It was odd to imagine that man with a wife and son, and it was even weirder to think that Trunks genuinely liked and looked up to him. Perhaps there was a softer side to the man that she had never seen come out. Ha! Right. She mentally laughed, shaking her head. She could figure out the living situation later. She still wasn't sure if Harry was fully healed up or not, and she wanted to make sure there weren't any injuries remaining. Really, Harry was her main focus right now, even more so than her own well-being. And Cane House was a nice, quiet, peaceful area to stay, even in spite of the man who owned it, plus it would be a decent way to gradually introduce Harry to others, as the Z Warriors frequently visited that place. Piccolo in particular seemed to be a big hit with young children. Goten and Trunks seemed to like him quite a bit. Goku seemed to be doing fine with Harry, which actually surprised her a bit. He wasn't a bad person, but he was also kind of an idiot. But despite that, Harry didn't seem to be afraid of him the way 21 had feared. Really, the only person Harry seemed to fear was 22, which was a problem still. There were bigger problems which needed dealt with for now, so her sister would have to wait. Annoyingly. Thankfully DSPLN wouldn't be an issue. Not when she was so much weaker than her. She just hoped she didn't have to DSPLN her too terribly often, lest she inadvertently trigger Harry's past trauma. She really didn't think he could stomach anything violent for the next few years, or so she didn't want Harry to get mixed up in all the fighting and threats to the planet like Gohan, Goten and Trunks did. She would sooner die herself than allow him to get involved in such things, and if Goku tried to persuade him, so help her. He wasn't a fighter. Not a chance. He barely understood his powers. You can figure this out later. Get him fed and cared for. She instructed herself, nodding in satisfaction. She smiled down at Harry and added, "Don't worry Harry, things are gonna be good for you now." Really? You'll see. She beamed. She turned to Mstr Rashi. "I'll take you up on your offer for now, but I don't want you pulling anything funny on either me or my sister. If you try to touch either one of us like you just did, then we'll lock you outside and tie you up like a dog. Don't threaten me with a good time." Ugh. Why? 22 groaned. Why did I have to lose my powers and be stuck with you? Are you done? 21 asked after a few more moments of theatrics from her evil half, who looked at her flatly. Pretty much. Good. You were getting annoying. Now you know what it's like living with you. Android 21 stared blankly at her. I have never been anywhere near as bad as you are. Don't be ridiculous. She said. TCH. As far as I'm concerned, you're way worse. Of course you would believe that. And what is that supposed to mean? It means you aren't able to think like an adult. We aren't adults. Why am I trying to deal with this? 21 muttered, ignoring 22 for the time being. Her mind was still wandering about to a number of the issues at hand. She for now had a place to stay, but what was she going to do? For work. What was she going to do to help Harry overcome his trauma? She was woefully unprepared for this. But she would learn. She had made a commitment. She promised Harry she would take care of him, and that was a promise she had absolutely no intention of breaking. She would learn as she went along. She would find her way in the world. She knew she should tell Harry at some point she was assuming the role of his mom, but the kid had enough issues right now, she didn't need to give him more. Besides, he seemed so terrified at the thought of her leaving him, which she couldn't dream of doing in a million years, that he couldn't think straight. The poor thing, he was so latched onto her, and being left alone with her harsh evil counterpart for several hours probably didn't help at all in that regard. She didn't even want to know what kind of awful things Android 22 had said, or even worse, done to the boy. Just the thought made her BLD boil. She clutched onto him a bit tighter, trying to keep him close and safe. Man, she really seems to care for him. Krillin remarked, noticing that 21 seemed to be tightly holding on to Harry, trying to protect him. I know, right? Goku's remarked with a shrug. It's like she adopted him or something. I did. 21 replied calmly. Huh. Don't you have to do a whole bunch of boring paperwork and stuff to adopt a kid though? Goku asked, confused. No. You just have to love them. 21 replied with a shrug. Wah. Harry muttered, looking up in shock at 21, who smiled warmly down at him. He had no idea what Miss 21 had just said, but it sounded like. Yup, I'll be taking care of you. She said with a smile. She knew he knew that, but she wasn't sure if she knew how much she had accepted this role. Harry was confused as to just why and how she liked him so much. What was it about him that made her want to stay? He was boring, he was a freak, he was worthless. That was all he had ever been told all his life. What did she see that they didn't? 21 readjusted him so his head rested on her shoulder. She could tell what he was thinking, and she didn't like it. Why was he so broken? Why did they have to leave him in such a horrible place? Why didn't anyone bother to check on him? It was so wrong. Whatever. He's mine now. She thought with a sigh. And I'm gonna take such good care of him. She gave him a gentle squeeze and rubbed his back. She couldn't find the right words to say to comfort him, so she decided she would let her actions do the talking for her. He seemed to be comforted by the gesture. She gave him a small smile and gently bounced him in her arms, giggling softly at the way he relaxed in her embrace. He clutched onto her arm as they entered the small house, nervous that this was just some super hyper-extended dream, and he was gonna wake up under the stairs again and he'd be beaten again, and... Despite the terror taking over his body, his mind was honestly floundering on the subject of proving this was nothing more than a dream. It had been so long, he had been through quite a bit in the past few hours, it didn't feel like a dream. Sure, that didn't even begin to take away his anxiety, fear and trauma, but there was a small voice telling him it was true, that Miss 21 was gonna take care of him now, that he was never gonna be with his old family, that he could stop being so afraid. He forced himself through his fear, breathing heavily through his nostrils until he gradually managed to calm himself down. His minor anxiety attack went unnoticed. He had hidden it well. Good. He wanted to hide them as much as he could. The last thing he wanted for 21 to have to deal with his problems. She was kind enough, he didn't want to leave more for her to deal with. That wasn't fair. So, he remained silent and tried to remain small as 21 held on to him. She could tell something was off, but she didn't want to press him just yet. She decides to hold him so that he could look around at the small home they would be residing in. So this is where we'll be staying for a little while, at least until we can find something else. It's a nice little place, Harry nodded his head in agreement and took in the sights the tiny house had to offer. To his surprise, there was a large turtle sleeping just outside on the warm sand. It was clear the turtle had slept through everything. And Harry had to admit, the place did seem nice. It at least seemed quiet, and unlikely that he'd be hurt here, especially with Miss 21 here as well. He decided he wanted to take a closer look at the turtle. One time one had wandered into the Dursley's yard while he was doing yard work, and the reptile had been delightful to have around while he was working, just slowly wandering around and taking in the sights. He never knew what became of it, but he suspected Aunt Marge's dog had something to do with it. 21 felt Harry squirming in her arms and blinked, deciding to set him down and let him look around. She could keep an eye on him easily enough. Harry quietly wandered around for a bit, slowly approaching the sleeping turtle, realizing just how big it was. The turtle stirred as he approached and looked up at him, waving with his front flipper arm. Harry timidly waved back, and the turtle looked at him with a half-eyes-closed look before shifting slightly in the sand so he could look at Harry clearer. "Hello there." Harry's eyes widened as the turtle actually spoke to him. This certainly wasn't the first time he had heard a reptile speak, but usually it was snakes that did so. Was this like the snakes, where he was the only one that could actually hear the turtle speak? Hi. You must be new. The turtle spoke. I'm Kame House's resident turtle, Turtle. Turtle introduced himself casually, and Harry was still having a hard time processing this. Yes, this turtle was speaking to him, but it didn't sound like when snakes spoke to him. Could turtles just talk in this world? That was cool. Are you a special turtle? Do all the turtles talk? The turtle tilted his head, then closed his eyes and thought about it. I don't think I've seen any other turtles that can talk like me, but I guess it's possible others could be out there. A lot weirdy things have happened, after all, like the big bubble gum guy that can turn stuff into candy by shooting beams at it. Harry blinked. That sounded really weird, but kinda cool. That almost sounded like someone else who had freakish powers like him. He genuinely didn't know how to react to that, so he simply remained silent. Yeah, and that's now ever including the aliens, killer robots, and giant wish-granting dragon. Turtle remarked. He could tell Harry wasn't from around here, so he was trying to help him in any way he could. Dragon? Like the big winged snakes? Harry asked, curiously. Kinda. Turtle nodded. Except they don't have wings here, but Shinron kinda looks like a big snake, I guess. He laughed softly. I heard the dragon on Namek is a lot bigger, though big enough to wear Shinron like a scarf, and he can grant 3 wishes instead of just 2. What else to go over? Ah, cut that out, Turtle, no need to overwhelm the boy with all that crazy stuff when he just got here. He'll come into his own soon enough. Little fella's pretty darn adaptable. Rashi called over good-naturedly. Turtle nodded his head. I guess he's right. Not much I can really tell you anyway. I wasn't there to see most of this stuff, so I'm not the best source of information. Harry nodded, feeling oddly comfortable talking with this turtle. Which was a very weird thing to think or say, but it was true. There was something about this new place that felt very, very different from his old home. But he liked it here. Not just because Miss 21 was here, it just felt friendly. Something he had never experienced back home. It was certainly more colorful than the drab, plastic feeling of Privet Drive. Everything here was bright and colorful like his old home, but while there it felt artificial and illegitimate, here it felt natural and comforting. It was a very new experience for him, one that he hoped would continue to linger. There was such a sense of history that made him wonder about all the things that had happened here, but there was also a sense of power. Something seemed to be in the air, suggesting that there was power beyond his wildest imagination. It was kinda similar to his freaky stuff, and that frightened him, but there was so much of it, everywhere, that it was as if the air itself was full of it. Actually, now that he stopped and thought about it, Miss 21 seemed to have a lot of that power, as did those new people he met. The only one who didn't have it was Miss 22, but he was afraid to ask her about that. Was this a world where freaky stuff was actually normal stuff? Did that mean that he was no longer freaky? That he finally belonged somewhere? He felt a sense of relief, of elation. No longer would he be abnormal. He finally had a place where he could feel he belonged, full of other people who could do odd, unusual things just like he could. It was enough to bring a small smile to his face. He decided to toddle his way back over to his caretaker. Looking up at her, he reached up with his tiny arms, in hopes of being picked up. Android 21 immediately complied with a soft giggle and hugged him close. Just having Harry snuggle close into her arms was such a nice feeling. He was such a calming presence, and he seemed to be happier already. 21 didn't know what was going through his mind right now, but she wanted to help him in any way she could. And if that was holding him close and letting him get comfortable, then that was what she'd do. She took a seat on a nearby rock and looked out to the sea with a soft sigh, smiling as the waves washed up onto the shore. It was quite tranquil. She could see why Rashi enjoyed the island life so much. Maybe she would find a nice island that she could live on with Harry, one not too far from civilization, hopefully. She wondered now, what would she do? She needed a place to live, but what would she do for money? How exactly could she work? Would people be accepting of a pink-skinned woman who may or may not have been a vicious killing machine who nearly destroyed the planet? Hopefully they would. And hopefully that DMN other half of hers wouldn't go about making life too difficult for her. Her general attitude and choice of words would no doubt cause her no ends of trouble down the road, and she was not looking forward to that. Hopefully karma would get her stuck in something frequently so she wouldn't have to listen to her. At least until she grew up. Seriously, she didn't know how she was going to deal with her sister. It was bad enough dealing with her on her own, but now she had Harry. And she also was back in the world she had nearly destroyed, and those who stopped her probably wouldn't be too happy to see her evil half again. Or her, for that matter. She wasn't evil, but her evil side was. So, how could she prove to them she wasn't a threat? Well, at least she does have her powers. 21 reasoned with a shrug, looking down to Harry before giving him another hug. As long as she had him, everything would be okay, right? It had to be. There was just no way she could allow things to go to hell again for him, not after he was finally pulled from that traumatic environment. She had to keep him away from the world's drama the best she could. He deserved to live in comfort, at least for a little while. He had enough hardship for one lifetime. She would make his life great. As soon as she found a source of income, though, in fact, she needed one fast. Harry needed to replace those ratty old clothes. He needed a lot. He needed all the things he had been denied thus far in his life, and from the way he was currently yawning, a nap was one of those things. "Heh, you sleepy, Harry?" she asked with a smile, and Harry shook his head, clearly trying to fight off the feeling. 21, however, just adjusted him so he was held closer to her chest, and let her heartbeat lull him to sleep. She rocked him slightly to soothe him and smiled as she watched him fall asleep. Then she let out a soft sigh. "Okay, I really need to get my life together, so does anyone know where I can find a job?" she asked. Goku thought about it before he smiled brightly. "Hey, you could try growing crops. I do that and sell the vegetables at the market. It's really fun, it helps keep you in shape, and the pay is great. That wouldn't be the worst thing we could do," 21 remarked, thinking about the suggestion. "It'd be away from people for a time, it'd keep us active dash. It'd be boring as hell." 22 snarled. "Sure, let's do it. That was on purpose." "Maybe." 21 shrugged, indifferently. She didn't really care what 22 thought. If she was problematic, then she'd bury her like the crops and leave her there. "All right. I can show you how to do it too. It's really easy." Then he began to describe in great detail the process of crops growing. 21 was surprised. Goku found a passion outside of fighting? Even Krillin was shocked. "I thought the only reason you got that job was because Chi-Chi made you. I didn't think you actually enjoyed it," he said. "Heh, well, it ain't training, but it beats doing nothing all day." Goku shrugged, laughing somewhat in the way that was both idiotic, but oddly insightful at the same time. 21 prided herself on being able to read people, both good and bad, but Goku was just a whole nother caliber beyond her comprehension. But, that odd mindset seemed to be helpful this time, so she was thankful for it. So alright folks, that's all for today. Stay tuned for part 3. Do subscribe, like and share for more such videos. Also check out the story and Gamer95 on FANFICTIONnet. Press the bell icon to be notified first on release. See you in the next video. Till then, goodbye.